Hi, I'm Maria Miles of Cunning Cards, and this is going to be just a little video introduction to my channel. It was brought to my attention by some of my friends that it might be a good idea for me to make some videos where I can just kind of share what I know about cartomancy and some other forms of divination that I offer as services as a spiritual consultant. So I've been doing divination for over 10 years now for myself and other people. I started out with tarot when I was around 13. I kind of took over my mom's tarot deck and started using that. I really liked it. It was really interesting. Shortly after that, I began studying the I Ching, which is a form of Taoist divination from China. Got really into that because I was a huge fan of the science fiction author Philip K. Dick. Still one of my favorite authors, although I do not use the Qing anymore, though it is a fascinating system. It's really, really cool. I'm glad that was part of my journey. I also have a background in studying astrology, which I got really into around the age of 16. And then in my early 20s, I began studying traditional astrology under a teacher, which I'd highly recommend that if you're interested in learning any of these arts, any of what I would call the mantic arts, meaning that the cartomancy, divination by playing card, geomancy, divination by earth, necromancy, divination by the dead, even those prophetic arts that do not end with mancy, I would kind of lump together here. Any of these systems require some form of being taught by someone else. You can learn a lot from books. I've learned a lot from books. There's a lot to be said about having that drive to teach yourself. But there are some things you can't really learn on your own. And as much as I am an autodidact, as much as I teach myself, I have to say that I'm forever in debt of those people who enriched and enhanced my educational journey through learning these various ways of foretelling the future. So, cartomancy, divination by playing card, is a really neat thing. I like it a lot. There's many different systems of it throughout Europe and here in the Americas as well. So playing cards in Europe came about, I think, in the 12th or 13th century. I believe there are earlier kind of forms or things that led up to it, but I'm not going to pretend like I have all of this stuff memorized. This is all just me kind of recollecting right now. But if I remember correctly, playing cards, the first deck of playing cards that was printed and manufactured occurred in like the 12th or 13th century. Printed probably isn't the proper word for what those cards were, but it wasn't long after the production of playing card decks that divination began happening with them, because there are accounts of this in I wouldn't say witch trials, but in trials involving people who claim to foretell the future. There's a long history of litigation and laws involving fortune tellers and fortune telling, and that would probably be a really good topic for another video. Now, as I said, there are many different forms of cartomantic divination throughout Europe. So the ones I'm familiar with, that I've kind of studied a little bit, not a lot. What I do is American card reading, which comes primarily from English cartomancy. However, other super popular forms of this would include the French French cartomantic forms, one of these being Lenormand, which is still a really popular oracle deck now, is generally how it's marketed, I've noticed. However, Lenormand has its origins in French cartomancy. You also have German and Russian style readings which use a different number of cards in their decks versus what we use in American and English cartomancy. Now, I use a 53 card deck because I remove one of the jokers. Some people remove both jokers, some people keep both in. It's really up to you and the style of reading you're doing, given that I do readings often for people who either are magicians or spirit workers, or who are adjacent to it, so they're familiar with it. So I tend to leave, well, I don't tend, I do. I leave the Joker cards in because they're kind of useful for figuring out details about certain situations that might involve another person doing magic against you. We'll cover that more in another video, though. I'm going to say that a lot, I'm sure. I've already said divination and cartomancy a million times. I've done 3 takes of this, and this is going to be the last one. So cartomancy, I enjoy, because I feel like it just has this practical air to it, versus with tarot, despite the fact that I really love the imagery and the art of it, I feel gets too bogged down in symbolism and has a tendency to become very vague. Now, that being said, that's probably just my own perception of it, because it doesn't speak to me in that way. I've gotten very, very detailed tarot readings from other readers before. However, when I would divine for others using the tarot, I never felt satisfied. When I was in my early 20s, I began studying geomancy, which is a form of divination that originates in North Africa and was spread throughout the Mediterranean and then to Europe, thanks to Arabic traders. It's still really popular. It's still a really popular form of divination, though it fell out of popularity amongst Europeans and European-descended peoples in, I believe, like the 18th or 19th century. But in the Renaissance, it was one of the most popular forms of foretelling the future. And that is definitely something we're going to talk about in another video, because geomancy is the other major form of divination that I offer as a service as cunning cards. So, again, I really like using playing cards because they feel practical. I've memorized the meanings of most of the cards. Some readers I know will write like keywords and stuff to it, and I think that's really cool. Each of the cards, too, does have an image kind of associated with it. In Lenormand, this is taken to a more obvious extreme, because Lenormand cards will have like the playing card that they're connected to involved in it, but they'll also tend to have a whole nother image that's associated with it on the card. Now, when I sometimes do Lenormand style readings, and for that I just remove a number of cards from this deck, and then I read them, and I just have the meanings memorized. But there are images associated with them. What I've noticed is that with playing cards, the readings, the images are kind of intuitive just from based on looking at them. For instance, the 4s. I know Charles Porterfield, who is one of the American cartomancers I've learned most from. A little shout out to him. He associates the 4s with the bedposts. So each of the 4s kind of have a name for different beds, such as 4 of clubs here is a stranger's bed. So sleeping in a bed that's not your own, traveling far away, sleeping alone, so on and so forth. But also, it can be the 4 walls of a house. There's this kind of overarching concept with 4s that, is just very simple. There's not anything super complex here. It's just the number 4 is a solid number. It shows you the shape of a square. And so then the divinatory meanings tend to have to do with things like strong foundations, also stagnation, because the 4 is a limited shape. It's a 2-dimensional shape. It doesn't go beyond that, versus the number 5 can kind of break out of that. I'll do a separate video about all this. I'm going to stop myself from getting into the symbolism too much. But I just want to bring up that, if you're going to become a reader, or if you're interested in getting a reading, and you just kind of want to know, well, how does all this work? It's really about the reader themselves being in tune with the form of divination that they're using. Now, a lot of forms of divination all over the world require you to be initiated into a religion and be taught by a teacher. And that is something to really bear in mind, that this is something that is a larger than you thing. Divination is bigger than any one reader. It is the summation of human experience up to this point that we're at right now. It really is. I did not make up the meanings for these cards. Maybe sometimes as a reader, I will notice different forms of manifestation for what that card might mean in somebody's life, but the meanings are far older than me. Far older than you, unless you're like some sort of weird ancient creepy vampire. But in most forms of divination, not most, in all forms of divination, the meanings and the symbols are beyond us. And so they're something we partake in. They're not something we create ourselves. They're something we learn to relate to and learn to relate to others. That's part of your job as a diviner. That's part of my job with my clients. When I give somebody a reading, I'm looking at the cards and I'm trying to draw from it an image of that person's life and the choices they have to make in the future. That's another thing. So when people get readings generally, and especially in tarot readings, and also in readings or consults that are based in modern astrology, typically it kind of goes like this. Everything in the reading is seen as some part of the querent's psyche. You're going to hear me use the word querent a lot, so that just means the person asking the question. While there is merit to using symbols to deepen one's understanding of oneself, that is not all that fortune telling and divination, playing cards, tarot cards, or astrology are meant for. Divination is about prediction. It's about predicting accurately. You want to give the most accurate prediction possible. It's diagnostic. Oftentimes when I am giving a reading to a client, I end up seeing some of their most intimate problems in the cards, and I have to handle that with grace and delicacy because I'm dealing with another human being and I want to extend empathy to them. And, I wouldn't want, if I was getting a reading, and sometimes it still happens, because oftentimes, and more often than not, the cards don't always have the best news. Doesn't mean the sky's falling, but it also doesn't mean that it's raining gold. Sounds horrifying. I don't want it to rain hot metal. But you get what I'm saying. Like, sometimes you have to deliver harsh news or things that are not the most comfortable to speak about. But that's part of the job, and that's part of what I do as a diviner. And if you want to be a reader, that's part of what you're going to have to do too. And so it's all about learning how to deliver that. And for you, if you want to be, and maybe you're not interested in being a diviner, let's say you're interested in getting a reading though. I'm just going to tell you point blank, you will be uncomfortable with some of the advice you get. Not because it's the wrong advice, but because you're going to really be blown away by the fact that this person, who you might not have met before, knows intimate details about your life. I'm not going to go fully into why or how this works, because honestly, I don't 100% know. But I do know that humans have been trying to foretell the future, and oftentimes accurately, for thousands of years. We don't do things over and over again that don't work. That's just not how maybe sometimes we do. But overall, the transmission of technology, the transmission of ideas, concepts, thoughts, we tend to stick with things that work. Things that don't work will die off. So, this is why you see like New Age fads. They don't have long-lasting power. They just don't stick around. Why is that? It's because they can't. I don't want to say they're like lacking an essential truth, but it's just I lost my train of thought, but now I'm back to it. They don't have the trial and error that is behind most forms of divination, like astrology. And especially, so I practice traditional medieval astrology, and that is based in what's called Arabic astrology. It was preserved by Arabic philosophers and astronomers, and this comes from the Hellenistic astrology. When you look at Vedic astrology in India, Yotish, too. Like, these are traditions that have been passed down for hundreds, thousands of years that have been being compiled that entire time. There's a lot to that I think a lot of people miss, or maybe they don't take that into account. So that's an important thing to kind of understand about what divination is and what trying to foretell the future is. You know, I go back and forth on believing about having a fatalistic view, like all things are set to happen, and one where we have, you know, more choice. I lean towards having more choice. So when you get a divination, it might not be... Honestly, most of the time, the most accurate... Well, oh God, I feel like I'm shooting myself in the foot here. The things that I know are 100% accurate are always those things that I can tell about the past and the present for the querent. So I'll look at what cards show up, and I will go, okay, well, XYZ happened, and now XYZ is happening, and here's the situation that's going to unfold from that, and here are your choices. Oftentimes, my clients will be like, wow, yeah, that's exactly what's going on. Occasionally, it can be hard to get a read on a person, honestly. And that's typically in situations where the querent really didn't know what they wanted to ask, and it can be really a difficult thing to get a clear message through when a person's unsure about what they actually want to know. So that's also why it's important, and something I spend time with my clients, is trying to develop the right question. I think I want to do videos about a lot of the things I talked about here, but I think I'm going to end this one here, because it's kind of broaching on going too long. But overall, I just kind of wanted to introduce myself and introduce this channel. I'm going to be doing more videos in the future where we'll go into the deeper topics, often most of the ones that I just talked about now. And I'm looking forward to it. If you have any interest in the subject, please like and subscribe, leave a comment, let me know if there's anything you'd like to know about. You can follow me on Facebook at facebook.com/cunningcards. I'm also on Instagram at cunningcards. And I have email for anybody, of course, feeling old here, but my business email I'll put down below, so that if you're interested and have any questions, you can just reach out directly to me and we can chat.